Shetland isn't so much a lot of islands surrounded by sea as a lot of sea with bits of land sticking up in it. 100 bits of land altogether, only 17 of which are inhabited. And although the whole archipelago is 70 miles long and 30 wide, you're never more than 3 miles from the sea. Shetland is massaged by long, snaking sea locks, allowing the North Sea almost to touch fingertips with the Atlantic. The weather, to say the least, is bracing. This time of year, the Gulf Stream is no more effective than a cup of warm water in a cold bath. There are no trees, so you'll find the famous little Shetland ponies sheltering behind layers of hair, on legs that dodge most of the wind by keeping them close to the ground. Traditionally, the 20,000 or so Shetlanders have made their living out of wool, fishing, and the kind of tourist who develops sunstroke under a 40-watt bulb. When Scotland began to make its plans for devolution, it was naturally understood that Shetland would be part of the deal. But now, suddenly, this tiny community, like the mouse that roared, is talking seriously about home rule for itself. Do you feel pretty close to Scotland at all, or are you more Shetlanders than you are
No,
Scots?
we're Shetland. And we'll always be Shetland.
What about Scotland?
Oh, well, look after themselves.
Yeah, we like Scotland.
Do you feel Scottish yourself?
No, never. Nobody up here does that.
The whole idea is not so far-fetched when you consider that Shetland, geographically, is a long way from Scotland, and hence from the seat of power in the new Scottish Assembly. Where exactly is Shetland? Well, here you've got Edinburgh, where the new Assembly is to be based. Up here on the northeast coast, there's Aberdeen. Now, a hiccup across the North Sea, just off the northern tip of Scotland, you've got the Orkneys. But to get to Shetland, you've got to cross 100 miles of stormy water. The group of islands that make up Shetland, in fact, are on the same parallel as Siberia and Bergen in that direction, and Greenland in the other. The people who live on these islands are further away from Edinburgh than Londoners are from Brussels. Historically, too, Shetland has only the most tenuous of connections with Scotland. And that's demonstrated very well here in this place called Jarlshof, on the southern tip of the island, which is one of the most remarkable archaeological sites ever excavated in the British Isles. Here, under a huge grass mound, protected for centuries by sand dunes, they discovered 3 quite distinct communities, which show, very simply, that Shetland has evolved through a series of invasions. Now, originally, it was populated by simple Stone Age folk who lived over here in these little round houses. They, in their turn, were invaded by the Picts, who built these wheel houses here. And finally, the Picts were invaded by the warlike Vikings, who built their settlement right on the doorstep. The Scots, in fact, didn't arrive until the 15th century, and their occupation is represented by this ruined farmhouse. Now, in 1977, the settlement is undergoing yet another occupation, and this one surely must be the most dramatic invasion of all. Oilmen, not Vikings, are the new invaders. Here at Sullom Voe, on the east coast of the main island, they're building the biggest oil terminal in Europe. The precious stuff will start to flow next year through 2 pipelines from wells in the Brent and Ninian fields. By 1980, it's estimated that the oil flowing into Shetland alone will be enough for 40% of Britain's needs. All of a sudden, these cold islands are hot property. But if the oilmen thought they were dealing with a bunch of gullible primitives when they came here, they were forced very quickly to change their minds. Shetlanders had seen it all before. And there's nothing like a bit of rape and pillage in the past to teach you how to look after yourself in the future. The way this tiny island's council has turned the oil invasion to its own advantage is the envy of politicians from Parliament down. It's very difficult, looking at this rather modest little town hall, to imagine it having much influence on anything, except maybe repairing the pavements or the street lighting. But don't be fooled by appearances. Very early on, the councillors in this little council chamber realised that they would have to control the oil, rather than let the oil control them, if they were to prevent the island becoming destroyed. So they drafted a unique piece of legislation, their very own private Act of Parliament, which gave them all the powers they needed. First of all, they could put the terminal, and remember this was to be the biggest oil terminal in the whole of Europe, exactly where they wanted it, at Sullom Voe. Now, such a development was obviously going to cause dramatic change and upheaval. So, in compensation, they wrung from the oil companies a payment of at least £1 million a year until the end of the century. Already, they've got £6 million of that fund safely invested in the bank. Next, their Act of Parliament allowed them to buy into the project if they wanted to, and they did. The council now controls 50% of the whole operation at Sullom Voe, which means that for every barrel of oil that will be stored in these big tanks here, the council will get a royalty. Those royalties are expected to add up to something like £11 million a year at peak. Now, while they were at it, the council thought that they would build and own the jetties, where the tankers will eventually load up with the crude oil to be taken away from Sullom Voe. The return on that little escapade is expected to be something like £500,000 a year. And finally, from all the development here, including even the houses that the construction workers are living in, they stand to make a fair old packet out of rent and rates. All in all, Shetland expects to make upwards of £100 million during the 25-year projected lifespan of the oil boom. Much of that will be invested in a reserve fund to help revitalise the old traditional industries once the oil has run out.
I think they've done an extremely difficult job very well.
I think they've made an excellent job of it. They've really done very well for Shetland, and we're in a very good position financially.
What Shetlanders want most of all is to be left exactly as they are. They don't even want a bigger share of the oil than they fought so impressively for. But if they don't get assurances that they can keep what they've got, actually written into the devolution bill, then watch out for a David and Goliath fight for independence. Shetland has an awful lot to lose in any political undermining of the setup here. What they fear most of all is that a Scottish Assembly might feel it has no duty to honour any or part of that precious and hard-fought-for Act of Parliament.